I call to order the January 24th Planning Commission meeting. Roll call, please.
Jeff here.
Lynn here.
Michael here.
Amanda here.
Tom here.
Please rise.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States.
Under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Thank you. So, do we have any deletions or to the agenda? May I have a motion to accept tonight's agenda? As
Motion to accept tonight's agenda.
Second that motion.
motion by Jeff, second by Amanda, all in favor?
Aye.
Has everybody read the minutes? Anybody have any edits or additions or changes or? May I have a motion to accept the minutes of January 10th, 2024?
Make a motion to accept the minutes, approve the minutes from
January 10th.
January 10th, 2024 as presented.
I second that motion.
Motion by Jeff, second by Amanda, all in favor.
Aye.
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 Does anybody have any declaration of conflicts of interest on tonight's agenda? No? No?
No.
Not Tom? Speak up, Tom. I can't see you, hear your head shake.
You saying I'm short? What are you doing with it?
Well, she's this way. I can't see you.
You can't see me over Amanda? Yeah. Lord.
Excuse me, we like to batter a little bit sometimes. Public comment. Are there any citizens in the audience that have anything they'd like to say that is not on tonight's agenda? No? Okay, so we will close public comment. We're moving right along. All right. Special presentation, do we have any? None. Design review and land use public hearings, ordinance TBD series 2024, amending provisions of general applicability contained in chapter 13 utilities code, chapter 16 zoning code, chapter 17 subdivision code, and chapter 18 building code of the Minturn municipal code. And we have a request for continuance.
We have to open it for public comment first. So.
Okay,
Do you want me to go through the staff report or just open and close and make a motion?
Open it.
open and close.
Okay. So public comment is open.
Is there anybody who would like to speak to ordinance TBD series 2024 that is in our audience tonight? Is anybody on?
No one online.
So we will close public comment. May I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to continue and table ordinance TBD series 2024 till
February 14th, please.
February 14th meeting.
I expect my Valentine.
Yes, Valentine's Day night.
I said candy from. I second that motion.
Okay, anybody? Second, motion by Jeff, second by Amanda, all in favor? Aye. Discussion direction items, Minturn forward code update.
Nope.
806 cemetery.
Huh?
806 cemetery.
Oh, B, I'm sorry. It's a bit changed. Design review and land use public hearings, 806 Cemetery Road, new maintenance and storage building. Madison?
So this is something that the cemetery has been working on for quite a while. They came back, they had originally come before y'all, I believe, a couple years ago with property or with a building. However, that building kind of straddled property lines, and there were some issues with the actual ownership of the land. And so the town has done a lot of work to quiet title land, and also the cemetery has moved this entirely onto land that they currently own. This is an 864 square foot maintenance and storage building. It's single level, maximum height measured to the midpoint of 14 feet above proposed grade. There's no parking really assigned to a maintenance and storage building. The one kind of not necessarily issue, but thing that I did want to bring everybody's attention to is the fact that this land is not zoned. It is within the landscape character area, but it is not within public facilities or recreational open space, which are the two zones that are over there. Which means that we don't technically have any dimensional standards that are applicable to this. However, what they've proposed, staff feels is likely in line of any future zoning, 15 feet away from property lines, when typically we have 10-foot rear setbacks. It's obviously well under 28 feet in height, which is the normal height limitation in town. And then obviously a building that is used as storage, we don't think would be an unapproved use should that continue. We have been advised by the town attorney that we do need to create zoning to put into place for this lot, so that any DRB approval remains valid. So staff recommends that there be any approval is labeled with a condition that town staff work with the applicant and the property owner to create zoning for this lot.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Who's speaking? Pedro, please.
Good evening. Pedro Campos with Zarin and Associates. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. Madison's covered some of the history. I think we were here at least 2 years ago, maybe 3. I'm glad to be here and as you mentioned, the project's now proposed within the boundary of the existing cemetery. We did look at the current code and actually the design review standards that have been changed since we were last here. We meet, I think we meet all of those. We have no issue with the zoning, I understand. This was, I think as a result of the parcel being annexed to the town within the last 5 years, I think. Obviously the cemetery's been there since the late 1800s. There's a long history there. So it was done under the county, I think it was resource zoning at the time. I guess the organization's only concern is, they're really, given we've been working on this for 3.5 years, we're really hoping to build this coming summer and fall. And I was just gonna ask what the time frame is for the zoning process, and if we think we can get through that this winter and spring. And on a parallel path, we continue to work on the documents to really try and build the project this. I know you can't assure me, but that's the concern. And if there's any other way of handling it that would allow the project to move forward, still, in keeping with the thought that the zoning application would come. I don't know if there's any timing. There's a time. I'm concerned about the time. That's happy to. There are 2 board members here, Art and John, from the Riverview Cemetery District. My colleagues Josh and Jesse that have been worked architect. If you have any questions about the proposal, we're prepared to answer any of those. I'll just stop there for
John.
Thank you. I reviewed everything in the packet. I thought everything looked fine. I guess a question more for staff is the lack of zoning on this property historically just an oversight, or is it just something that's long been on the books to do or to zone it, and we just haven't?
Pedro kind of hit the nail on the head. There was no zoning applied to the property when it was annexed in 5 years ago. And so it hasn't really been an issue up until this point because there's been real application for construction, and it was only after we were just like, oh, we don't have setbacks to apply to this and this.
So what is, I know that further to the south is the CUP holding zone or whatever it's called. Public Works. What zone what's the closest zone?
So the closest geographically would be the public facilities zone district. However, on talking with the town attorney and Scott Hunn, planning director, we don't feel like it's appropriate to kind of lump this under that. We would likely be creating a whole new specific zone district for the cemetery zone district or something like that.
Yeah, which seems to make total sense. So to answer your question, I wouldn't think that would take very long.
No, we're hoping to bring an ordinance before y'all in February.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds
So-
good. That makes entire sense. I agree as well.
Yeah.
You can't just have it out there without zoning. Again, I wanted to reiterate, we did look at closely at the code, the design standards. We had assumed at least a 50-foot setback, and so we we tried to do it right and have all the drainage handle, the pitch of the roof. So hopefully that's taken into account, and I think we can move, if we can really keep a good pace. Just have to discuss what that new zoning designation is, and what it encompasses. In doing that, it's probably not appropriate for this meeting, but just anticipating that we'll have some uses out there that have been out there for a long time that we'll have to work through how zoning works, some of the dimensional limitations, things that it's a bit of a unique process, I think.
Yeah, and I think I don't know who's involved, like if Art and John, if you guys are involved with the discussions with the town in terms of like, usually with zoning, there comes some kind of definitions for what the uses are and all of that. And obviously, like you said, there's a lot of historic use to it, and
Yeah.
I don't know how far out of the box you have to think about what future uses there are
Yeah.
for a
and
cemetery district.
For instance, there's a mausoleum there.
Right.
But there's no crematory, for instance, and those are some things that sometimes come and are within cemeteries. So we have to talk through that. The other, I'm pretty sure it would trigger a referral process. Zoning I don't know if that would be contained within the town or, if it's not a rezoning, it's not an upzoning. So that's something I would be, that's where we get into the timing concerns. All of a sudden we have comments from wildlife department, those sorts of things, just to be frank. So I don't know if that does trigger a referral process.
That was not brought up to me by either the town attorney or Scott Hahn. But it could be that they haven't, dug deep into what would actually be required to address new zoning rather than, zoning amendment.
I think a lot of it too has to do with like change of use versus historical use, and obviously it's not changing. Yeah, the use is staying the same, so there might be some gray area there in terms of like what triggers a referral process and what doesn't. But I'm with you. I mean, my hope would be that it's a pretty quick, concise definition of what the new zone is and what it entails, and then it's an ordinance and it goes in front of us or council pretty quick.
I think we want to look at some precedent of what, what are the other cemeteries, Eagle County or adjacent counties. I know of one, Eagle, Sunset View Cemetery, it's its own district. What that's owned, I believe that's partly in the town, partly in Eagle County. It's actually interesting. We've helped them as well over the years. So we maybe want to look at precedent.
Michael?
No, I'm done. I don't have any problems with the plans as they are.
I sort of, reading the condition and the question to Madison, I mean, reading the condition as far as, says you have to work on zone district with the town within 3 months, I don't know, and you can correct me or tell me, I don't know if, the way I read it, I don't know, are we gonna, it's a shed, already have, something similar to a shed there, and are we saying that we're withholding the building permit until they do this, or they just have to get the ball rolling and they can pretty much do their shed as long as in good faith we start getting the rest of this stuff?
We
Yeah,
specifically didn't want to tie it to the building permit. Just because this is something that could, if our attorneys and their attorneys or whoever, it could become a larger process. And so we certainly didn't want to, given that, as you accurately stated, there's already essentially a shed on the property that's only like 10 feet away from this one. So we didn't want to tie it to the building permit, so that we wouldn't be holding them up.
well, yeah, so that, I think that pretty much answers your concerns, Pedro, that you want to start, if we approve it today, you can pretty much, according to what I'm hearing, submit for your building permit and get your ball rolling, but in good faith, you're going to agree, if we all agree to, you know, the condition that is recommended to us from staff and
It's gotta
council.
go to the council first, but yeah,
Oh, it does go to council for the,
yeah, I mean, we're just recommending approval to the town council.
For this, yeah, it'll go on consent agenda,
Right.
so they'll have to.
So,
They have an issue.
yeah,
they have a
so it
problem.
should be, yeah, it should be on consent agenda. If it doesn't get called up, then it gets passed and he could theoretically apply for his building permit, like you said, in good faith. Behind the scenes, the zoning is just kind of happening.
Amanda?
that explains it.
So the only question I had is on the condition. It says zone district amendment. Is that the right terminology?
That's the process that we have in our code in Article 21, Division 2 or 3. We don't really have an application for creations of new zone districts, and so since it's already within the Lions Head character area, we would be amending the Lions Head character area zone district map and zoning in the code to reflect essentially a new zone district.
Thomas?
I would just suggest amending the language in here to be specific. So there is no confusion. So step one is not assuming we approve final plans, then the applicant is able to move forward with specific provisions to gain the permit and commence construction, concurrently working with town staff to continue development and establishment of the zone district for further processes at the cemetery.
Sounds good, Tom.
Good.
Travis, do you have all that?
Yeah.
That sounds very acceptable. I think that's very reasonable.
That's all I got.
Now, you're gonna have to read that back.
Right, so which is why I need Tom to like review it.
Make the motion, you just say.
Sure, Tom, wanna make a motion? Well, no, I need public comment to be open first.
Then we gotta. comment.
Is there anybody out in the audience who has a public comment? No, 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 no. Is there anybody on Zoom?
No.
Close public comment.
All right, so I'd like to make a motion to approve final plans for 806 Cemetery Road. With the condition that the applicant should work with the town staff to initiate a zone district amendment for the subject property within 3 months of any DRB approval.
May I have a second?
Did you want that language change or?
Cause that's
Got
not the
it.
language change.
Do you want to add Tom's language?
Concurrent, you can add concurrent. However you want to. However you want to. Make it read, just the intent is that. The. Zoning work with staff does not impact. The ability to,
Well, the approval of this permit is going to the concurrence list for town council. Right?
correct.
Approval of DRB will go on consent agenda for council, yes.
Yeah, just that there's just some kind of a note in there that says that the building. Permit application process and review does not get held up by. The work.
I would just say the applicant is approved to be forwarded for commencement of DRB process. While concurrently working with town staff to establish the new zoning district amendment.
I'm good with Tom's language.
Me too.
I second.
Do you have it on, Madison?
She's got 6 different versions.
Do have 6 different versions, but I think I can put them all together and come up with something that sounds good.
You can do both
Thank you.
there. That's it.
So with that, we have a motion by Jeff, a second by Amanda. May I have a roll call vote, please?
That was a second by Mike.
Oh, by Mike. Okay, I'm sorry.
Jeff, I.
Lynn, I.
Michael, I.
All right,
Thank you very much. I look forward to coming back and discussing.
I want to say thank you for this awesome packet with
It's very
everything in there.
thorough.
Very thorough, very well
Good
done.
job, Pedro.
Thank you very much. We've been at it for a
Makes our
while.
life a lot easier.
It's gonna be fun coming back and discussing the zoning amendment. New zone district, it's not something.
I'm glad you think it's fun.
so if you want to streamline, I would not use crematorium in your discussion.
Well, those are the things, yeah.
I got it.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time,
everybody. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Good night. Yes, that's okay.
I had to drive down to Denver for my FAA flight, so everything else was a win.
Yeah, what?
You know what?
What did he say about?
The FAA.
Yeah, that important bill.
Okay, discussion direction items, Minturn Forward Code Update Project.
I'm actually gonna let Matt take this one. Matt, are you out there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Again,
Hi,
How are you guys?
good. How are you, Mac?
Good.
Excellent.
So, yeah, I think we can keep this pretty brief this evening. The memo that was included in your packet sort of spelled out the next steps for the code update process. The first item that we'd like to hopefully try and wrap up this evening if possible is identifying the components of a form-based code that the planning commission would like to see incorporated as part of the code update. And included in it with the memo was a worksheet with sort of a checklist of the various components that just to try and streamline the process of identifying which components those were that you wanted to see included. I don't know if you guys want to go through and talk about the components that you'd like to see included, or just provide a list to Madison or Scott of those items. I guess I'll pause there and ask, are you guys in a place where you're ready to identify those components from a form-based code that you want to see incorporated?
Matt, if I might interrupt, Tom was
Sure.
not here last week to discuss this with us, or 2 weeks ago. So I'm going to start with him. And we're going to run through it one more time just as to have people thought about it and looked at it and how they feel. And then we'll go from there. Thank you.
So referencing your checklist map, I'm in favor, basically with all the bullets in public space standards, building form standards, under the form-based format. After that, admittedly, I'm hesitant to get that detailed on architectural. I would think our current traditional code for the latter four, architectural block, landscape, and stormwater, are adequately covered. And to be honest, the architectural piece, I don't know, gets a little squishy since it comes into the DRB world in regards to opinion. I don't know, hypothetically keep using it the 100 block. But it would seem to me that the building form standards, building frontage design standards, as an example, I think adequately cover that without handcuffing applicants to a detail I'm not in favor of. So to be straight to the point, I'm on board with public space standards, building form standards for form-based code modification. The other remaining ones, I'm kind of in line with the more traditional as we've spelled out in our current code.
On the next, okay. Okay, so I feel like I had a different take on it, completely. So the only ones that I thought, so I thought we were moving towards the traditional code, but then there were just sections of the form base that we were going to be included. And then this was us to say which sections. I definitely love the, like Tom did, the public space standards, think those need to be added in. Green standards also were on my list. The building form was kind of out because I thought that it was duplicative of our traditional code that we were maintaining. So I think we probably need some additional conversation around that section. Similar, I didn't have strong feelings for architectural block and standards, but I feel, and storm, but I feel like those are already covered with our traditional. So it was, for me, it was just the public and green.
I don't
Thank
think
you,
we're that far
Amanda.
apart.
Michael,
No, we're not that far.
are you done?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Matt, I as well have no issue with the public space standards, but, I'm more on board with the traditional form, just in general, and basically for the point, you know, if we got into this form with the building form standards and this and that, my opinion feels that, you know, we're sort of I feel that we're throwing more rules and more stuff out there. And, you know, I sort of like to keep it simple. If you can comply with your setbacks and your height and your lot coverage, you know, you design pretty much what you want and bring it to us. So, you know, I'm, you know, most, you know, for traditional, you know, I know the Vale's traditional. And I'm for traditional, but, you know, with, you know, stuff added into it, like public space standards. But the other stuff gets, you know, a little extensive. Because I don't think that, you know, if we're Eagle, you know, town with a lot of empty space, with a lot of areas, you know, I might have a different feeling, but for where we are and what we got, that's where I'm at.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeff,
Thanks. I don't necessarily think that the public space, I don't know that there's enough public space in Minturn to have that even apply. So if there was a bunch of empty space that we were looking to do, then maybe this would, if we were a bigger town, it might, I feel like it might have be more applicable. So that I didn't necessarily feel like that was much that we needed to include. The building form, I like the types and the design standards section of that, but that's about it. I don't like the function and the use, as in, you know, certain buildings and certain functions for certain buildings. I think that's all too prescriptive. And I don't necessarily think that the encroachment side of it is that applicable, or that I like that part of it. I like the traditional better. So really, I just like the building type and maybe some of the design standards from the form for certain zones. And then from the architectural side, I like the design guideline kind of part of it, but I feel like we've already worked on in years past on some design guidelines. We have kind of a rough draft of that that's a little more traditional. I don't like the requirements, like, for instance, for certain roof types in certain parts of town. But I do think that when we were going through the 100 block charrettes and all of that stuff, we ended up with something more in a form-based code side for architecture. And, you know, when we were talking about second floor or third floors had to be stepped back further off the road, and they had to be cadences where you only went 20 feet and then it had to step and they had to do this and that. So there was rhythm to the buildings and it couldn't just be long expanses. That to me seemed like we were applying the form-based code to the 100 block. So I think there may be parts of town where some of the architectural standards may work for that. But I think the further south you go, the less that becomes. I think the further south you go, it doesn't really work. And I think we need to allow more flexibility and creativity and freedom the further south we go. And I think it really only applies to maybe right up to Michael's house.
Okay, well, I kind of made my list on a scrap piece of paper, so I'm going to read that. Number one, this has been an interesting process to go through. We've always talked about correcting our code, bringing it up to date. And I've been here for a while, so that's been difficult to go back and look at the things. And one thing in Amanda's minutes, in her comment, she said, we would like to keep consistency with the community has used historically, as well as our neighbors in the county. Therefore, I would question what our neighbors in the county use. And Michael just said Vail. Be nice to know what Avon and Eagle do. And that was one of her comments. So if we could try to figure that out. I feel like creating a hybrid code for this town is way too much of a project. We're a very small town. We're 500 homes or possibly 6 or 7 going on in the next couple years with about 500 people, 1,100 people. So to go into that depth on that seems to me to be way too much. We're not a big town like the one we had presented to us on the 10th of January, and we all knew that. So I don't think a true hybrid is something we want either. We worked for many, many hours a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, going through 2020, 21, hour after hour after hour, going through what we thought with this code. And we came up with a lot of good work. And I'd like to be able to use that then to start at the beginning and spend all that time and money again to get to what we need to do. When we have a fairly good code, we know it needs work. There is nothing to keep us from continuing that process, and it might take a little less time and cost a little less money, and we'd be able to use what we've already done. We've already had 4 meetings on this and not really settled. So by doing that, it might help us get going and start correcting our traditional code. We probably would be a lot further along if we could do that. So I, at this point, am, there's a couple things Jeff said that I'm going to think about, but I don't see where we have that much room left in this valley for growth, like what you say with the parks and things. Our town is very small. There's not a lot of big open land spaces to worry about how to put blocks in there and things like that. And our blocks are 600 feet long. So I'm going to say I'm going to stick with traditional. That was long and winded, and I'll try to clear it up when I write it to get to Madison in this nice little piece of paper we have.
Okay, is that everybody?
That's it.
All right. So just a couple points. The first being that I understand, and I was working under the impression based on our last discussion that the intent is to move forward with kind of the traditional code like the town has now, with maybe some form-based components, as we said last meeting, peppered into the updated code. And that was the intent of trying to understand what are those components that you all as a planning commission would like to see integrated. And some of those elements may already be addressed in the existing code in some way or another. I think even if they are in the existing code, it's important for myself and Scott and Madison to understand that those components are still important to carry forward in the updated code. So that I wanted to clarify that again, we're looking at largely a traditional sort of format for the land use code with maybe some form-based code elements integrated within the updated code. And as far as I mean, I heard some consistency about what sort of form-based code elements there might be interest in incorporating, and maybe not so much consistency on others. So I guess I'm wondering, would you all like to have a discussion now? I mean, I know you all went individually through what you would like to see. I'm trying to figure out how to get some level of consensus. And I don't know if that's best through a discussion now, or how might be the best approach to kind of narrow down. And really what I'm trying to get at is understanding what are these components that need to be integrated with the updated code, so that, because the next step for us is really to start digging into actually work on the code. And so it would be helpful to know right now what from a sort of formatting and overall look at the updated code, what are these elements that either exist in the code today and maybe need some revamping or beefing up, or elements that are missing that we need to work on integrating. Does that make sense?
Jeff has his hand raised, Matt, so we're gonna let him go first.
Matt, I just feel like, and I've been saying this for a while, that I feel like there's already red flags that I'm sure you and Scott have flagged.
Yep.
And those are the places where I think it's going to be obvious where we're lacking in either language or illustrations that would help define the intent of whatever section it is that you're working on. And I think until we get into the sausage making, that is where it's going to become evident, and getting hung up on this back. We could spend meeting after meeting going round and round and get nowhere, I think, talking about what elements of form-based we want to include and what we don't. And I just feel like when we actually get into the work of it and the review of it, that is going to be evident. I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic that it's going to be evident where there's going to be a point at which certain sections of the code are going to point themselves out and say, here would be a great opportunity to say this or show that in terms of a diagram, an illustration, or whatever that specifically relates to a certain zone. Because some zones are going to, like I said, in the 100 block, or maybe it's the 200 block, or maybe it's all the way to the 400 block. The commercial part of town is going to, in my opinion, lend itself more to this than a bunch of residential zones that are already 100% developed. And looking in the crystal ball of, if everybody scraped their lot and redeveloped, what does the code need to look like to make sure that we don't throw out the character of the town with a redevelopment of a whole zone, let's say. And I know that's really a dramatic, over exaggeration of what could happen. But if you just took a time lapse over 20 years, let's say, of a block, and that just slowly got redeveloped and houses got redone or changed or scraped and rebuilt, you could lose the character if you don't write this code the right way, right? So I just think that as we get into it, it's going to be obvious which parts of town might benefit from a little more peppering of some form, language or illustrations or whatever. But I just think it's going to be minimal. I think that the overall tone of all of us here seem to be that, A, we've done a lot of work we did a lot of work on design guidelines. We did a lot of work on definitions. We did a lot of work on setbacks and pervious, impervious, all that kind of general traditional nuts and bolts stuff that you have to deal with on most applications. And I just think it's going to be obvious when you guys get into it and as we're reviewing it, where we need to add the pepper and where we need to add the salt.
Okay. Is that the general consensus of the planning commission? Other commissioners that we,
I say yes. Michael, thumbs up or down?
I say yes.
I say absolutely no. I absolutely feel strongly that we have to get public space standards in somewhere. I feel like it is lacking, and I think we're ignoring that we have some opportunities in the 100 block that's going to impact street design, parking space. We also have opportunities outside, and that's just the only one that I feel pretty strongly about. And then again, the second one, I just feel like we can strengthen, and this is part of our community plan, the green standards. So those are the only two that I'd like to see added.
I think, the fact of the matter is, we're all junior varsity here when it comes to form standards. It's not like it's a tool we're used to using. So to segue off of Jeff and Amanda on this, in some ways, to add red pepper flakes to your salt and pepper would be, you two are the experts. So as you're going through this, I would argue to actually streamline the process. Examples or situations that come up as you're going through the code that you would say, you know what? If I insert this form-based piece right here, this nice little picture that says 1,000 words, that meets all the standards of the traditional piece, that includes public space, etc. And then that is brought forward along with traditional context and text. And then here you go, commission, here's your options. We like the picture, move on, next. So instead of us having to sit here and figure out how to make the dough, my recommendation is deferring to your expertise of where you feel form-based would fit in those spots, to include the areas of emphasis as Amanda denoted. And that way we streamline this process and don't spend an inordinate amount of time reinventing the wheel.
I don't think we're,
okay, I hear what you're saying. And that was sort of going to be my suggestion too, is maybe, I mean, I've heard generally some elements that I think we can keep in mind, and we being Scott and myself and Madison, as we start really digging into the code update, as far as some code form-based elements to keep in mind, and that we really, at this point, it sounds like everybody's ready to roll up their sleeves and get into the nitty-gritty work of this. So, and then as we move along, we'll offer suggestions based on kind of some of these components that there was interest in, where those might fit as we work through the code update.
Yeah, Matt, I'd like to say one thing. Pretty much what you're saying is, yeah, I think that, like the traditional code, we know what Man and Tom have stated, it's important to them. We know that you guys write code. If you think something, if there's something like that you don't like about the 100 block that everybody worked on for 2 years or something, or if you don't like something, anything with our existing code, bring that forward and we'll say whether we agree or disagree. So that's sort of what,
that's where Jeff's going.
yeah, that's what.
Okay, no, I hear that, and so that makes sense. And that's the direction we will move forward with. I will just pause here quickly. And I'd like to talk quickly about sort of next steps and actually talk about the plan for getting going with the code update. But before I do that, any other thoughts or questions related to
I do have a question about the meetings you're talking about in March. Do you really think we're going to be at a point to do it at that time?
Can I pause on responding to that and I'll answer that when we get into talking about the next steps. Is that okay?
Okay, yeah, thank you.
All right. Yep. Any other thoughts, questions, comments?
No,
Okay. So in terms of next steps, what we were thinking would be first is to find components of the code that maybe don't necessitate a lot of community engagement, so that we can start working on those while at the same time we start going out to the community for input on other elements of the code update that we think do require input from the community. And so the first portion of the code that we were thinking we could begin working on with you all would be starting to talk about review procedures. So the different processes for the various types of applications that go in front of the planning commission and or the board or town council. So starting to get into that and looking for opportunities to clean up that section of the code and maybe streamline some of the processes like we talked about in the code assessment. So that's something we'd like to get going on here in the near future. I need to confer with Scott as far as to kind of come up with a tentative timeline for that, but probably in the next month or so, we'd get the ball rolling on that. And at the same time, we've talked about doing a community survey and maybe having some open house meetings to try and get input from the community about what design elements, sort of what physical attributes of the different neighborhoods or distinct areas in Minturn, what defines those areas. And the intent of that is to, because character was identified in the community plan as being one of these critical elements or priorities for the community, is preserving and enhancing the character of Minturn. So we'd like to know, kind of from a design standpoint or from a zoning standpoint, what is it that defines these different, I guess for lack of a better term, neighborhoods or distinct areas in Minturn. And so we'd like to use the survey and the open house meetings to try and get input from the community, and then take that input and use that to provide direction for our work on updating the zoning districts in Minturn and regulations related to zoning in terms of what types of uses are allowed in different zone districts, as well as that input would also be valuable for updating the sort of intent or purpose, or describing the character of the different areas in Minturn, or different zone districts in Minturn, and also modifying the town's design guidelines as necessary. So really trying to delve down into what physical attributes of different parts of town are important to people and what they think really helps define the character of these different areas. I will pause there. Does that make sense? Any questions?
Matt, I have a question.
Yep.
I would like it very much if when you get down to the questions going into the survey, that we have a short meeting on that so that the people from the commission can be involved.
Okay, and that was our plan. So our hope is to, so the survey questions, we're hoping to keep that pretty limited, maybe a max of 5 questions. And we would draft those, what I've talked to Scott and Madison about is having a draft of the survey questions available for you all to review at your first meeting in February, so that we can, using your input, finalize those survey questions and start distributing the survey in mid-February and run that probably through the end of March. And at the same time, to your earlier question, our initial thoughts were to, while the survey is available to the community, also host some open house meetings to invite folks to come in and talk with us about kind of along the same lines as the survey questions, asking them to help us better understand what are these physical attributes of the different neighborhoods in town that make them sort of unique and special places. And if there's concerns about the timeline for those open house meetings, certainly happy to hear those thoughts. And we can adjust the schedule accordingly. I mean, there's nothing written in stone at this point. That's just sort of some initial thoughts that we've had to get the ball rolling on the code update.
Well, oh, I'm sorry, Amanda.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that I think once we get into February and see how it goes, we can make a decision as to the public meetings. I mean, we'd like to get them done as soon as possible. I understand that. But let's see how far we get. Who's next?
Okay.
Michael is next, Matt.
Matt, and also we were talking before, I think that two things. One, if we're gonna bring, I think if we're bringing people in, you know, maybe we can consider bringing people in that are in certain zone districts, bring a district in at a time or certain or certain
This sounds like the Hunger Games.
I was just thinking the same thing.
or certain
District 9.
you know, I just think that like, and you know.
I think what Michael's saying,
For example, you know, people that live in the blocks, people that live on Eagle Street, for example, you know, we our neighborhood, you know, I'm sure our neighborhood likes our neighborhood and, you know, and we, you know, we'd like to probably, the people in our neighborhood would like to discuss, you know, uses, you know, specifically, and if we did want to change stuff in our area. And we had mentioned that we would potentially do that before. And then the other part of the question is I don't know the thoughts, like Lynn said, come back and with the questions and, you know, stuff like that, but also the thoughts of how we're gonna, I like zone districts, but what are we gonna do? Notify registered voters, like, you know,
We notify property owners.
Yeah.
what's that?
We notify property owners, not registered voters.
Is that what it is? Yeah. So yeah, that's great. Thank you. But yeah, that's my. You know, I'm sure Jeff likes his end of town coming in too.
We love ourselves. Just ask us.
You love yourself?
can you tell Matt, the whole town loves itself, just as we are.
Do you mind?
No,
Okay.
speak up, my dear.
I don't know that we can accommodate open houses for each individual zone district. We have like 27 zone districts. We can't have 27 open houses. So what we can do is encourage people to attend the open houses. And we can have them starting at like, I don't know, 1 o'clock in the afternoon and go for hours if need be. But I do not think it is in anybody's bandwidth to hold 27 different events. So
I was gonna say something similar, which was, we all signed up for speed to delivery, like, we know this has got to get done. And I feel like what just was laid out is not a speed to delivery, it's like pushing this into August. And I'm just being very honest, like, it feels like you should be, again, what Tom said, you guys are the professionals, the experts, have the draft zone districts and then have the open houses and get feedback. I don't think it's going to having these open houses, thank you for saying that, doesn't seem very logical. You're gonna get a whole ton of feedback that's not already been done, either through the cabarets, the community plans, the already character descriptions, all of that is a great starting point that we should have a draft going in there. I just feel like the more open houses, the more this drags on, we are officially pushing this down the road.
I think it's similar to what we decided, Jeff suggested about waiting to get to council once we have something done.
Yeah.
It's similar to that, and I agree with that. We need to have something to show those people or to have them talk, not just come in and throw a bunch of ideas out that go in a circle again.
Well, I think that the open houses, and I would like to clarify, I wasn't saying that we shouldn't do them at all, just not one for every different zone district.
So the
Yeah, they definitely want to have a special meeting for Michael's,
And Southtown.
for Michael and Amanda's street.
But,
And then after that,
No, I don't, I want to hear.
but I do think that there is value in the open houses, given that it could be that we put stuff to paper that it comes out, people really don't like it. They really don't agree with it. And at that point, we then have to rewrite it. And at that point,
Gotcha.
we've written things twice rather than taking the time to get people's feedback and then write things once that people will agree with and not come out in mass to planning commission or council and disagree and send us back to the drawing board. I believe that's the impetus behind.
I get it.
But don't we already have a start? I mean, don't we already have like, you have all of. Things that can be lifted and should like,
Well, absolutely, but
We still
but
need to.
there's
yeah,
there's a reason why we're rewriting it. It's not just to carry forward all of the old stuff.
No, but at the same point, going in with a blank slate and asking people for minutes is just like. Yeah, I just feel like we are dragging this out and
Well, Scott informed us it's gonna take like a year. And I
and
can
we're
see
already
how that.
behind. Based on his original schedule, that would be done in June.
Hold on, Jeff has his.
So historically, whether it's voting or whether it's community meetings or whatever it is, it's, I'm not trying to rag on everybody, but it's poor turnout. There's always a very poor turnout. So I feel like it would be maybe more beneficial to whether we have a new, a more internet-based thing and drop a note in the box outside, whatever it is, but open it up to like a period of time, whether it's a Survey Monkey that goes for 20 days or 2 weeks, and put it out to the community to say, hey, this is open. We want to know what you think about your zone district. What makes all the people on Eagle Street so cool? Whatever it is, that, if we could come up with what those 5 questions are, let's say by the next meeting, then why can't we start a community-wide, more of like a survey that goes for a short period of time that could streamline it, like Amanda's asking for, and we could have one meeting at the end of that maybe by that time you've got some data that is up on the boards, and everybody that wants to show up can show up, because if it's just 1 or 2 meetings, you're going to get a small little peppering of people who care and who are available on that night, and that's the way it's going to be. And I feel like if we throw a wider net out for a little longer period of time, you're going to catch more fish, and then you're going to give more people some opportunity to say, if they can just take their own time and go on a Survey Monkey and go answer the questions like we did for the charrette, then, and even with the charrette, we got very little feedback. We might have gotten 20 people.
I like the property owner thing too, though, Jeff.
Well, it would go to property
Yeah.
owners.
We go to all the property owners and let them all know, and then put it in the newsletter and we can blast people a number of ways, and word will get out. We can put even some posters up around town. We can put some things in the restaurants.
Well, that's what you say. That's like
Just
random people. You're saying.
no, everybody, and give everybody the opportunity to put in, because this is not this is important, right? And to hear from people what makes, for Matt and for Madison and Scott, to know what makes the community, each zone,
Is it not in the manager's report that we're gonna be doing a new town survey?
Yeah, in a few months,
Yeah.
this would,
It would not overlap.
it would not overlap.
I don't know. I mean, I just think that it's
And the goal for the survey was to use SurveyMonkey or something like that and send it out via e-blast and newsletters and maybe hand out cards with QR codes at different restaurants that people could look at, things like that, so we could go to where the people are. So I do want to assure you that that was certainly in the plan.
And then like to Amanda's point, like then draw a line in the sand and let's say we're done and let's keep moving.
And stupid question, if we, because I'm not a great computer guy. Okay, so if we do it that way. Do we take? How does the response get weighed? Does it get weighed does it get weighed from people that actually property owners that own property in town? Or somebody that lives in Eagleville?
No, I think you have to be a property owner.
There we go.
I don't think anybody gets to just spout off.
That's a good answer. Thank you.
That's my opinion. I mean, it's not like public comment.
Sorry.
Oh, I agree.
When frickin' frack are done, we have reflections of Michael's up. They talk. I know. No, there's another name for me, but Michael won't say it in public.
Oh, record.
So in a nutshell, my suggestion would be that the structure of meetings and who and when and where to include the public input loosely mirrors what we did with the community plan without multiple public hearings. So the answer to your question in regards to how it's weighted, I would throw out there would be in a joint meeting between town council and commission. And so if it's framed properly where this is what we have, we're talking traditional code, form-based code, here's what Scott and Matt have brought forward to us. Here are the tools that were used for public comment. Here are some of the things they've had. What do you think? Go around the corner. You know, so because at the end of the day, the decisionary body is going to have to come up with that. So at the end of the day, it's the individuals sitting here and the individuals in council, they're going to weigh the validity of what's been submitted by specifically residents on Eagle. Otherwise, whatever else is sent in will be immediately accepted. Eagle, questionable, but in all seriousness,
We had.
yeah.
Throw south into town.
That's how this shirt's.
Well, and keep in mind that by the time this gets in front of the council, we're gonna have a
Brand new.
pretty new council.
Absolutely. Well, maybe. We'll have somewhat of a new council.
I may never get there.
So
Matt,
if I can
Are we
just
totally-
chime in quickly.
let's
sorry, go
jump
ahead.
in here, Matt.
So just a couple of comments. First, I understand the concerns about community engagement, prolonging the code update process. And in an ideal world, the community plan, which is really where you do that heavy lifting and go out to the community and get all that great input to provide direction for the future of the community. Ideally, that's what we would just use for the code update. However, based on what I've heard from Scott is that during the community plan process, there were some preliminary discussions about zoning, and I think there were some promises made that during this code update, there would be additional opportunity to weigh in on whatever the new zoning districts are in Minturn. So I think there's some obligation that we have to have a bit of additional discussion with the community about how, because I think one of the key elements or key priorities of this whole effort is to consolidate and simplify the town zoning district. So we need to have a bit more discussion with the community about what that looks like. And again, trying to protect or preserve the character of Minturn and its neighborhoods, really kind of from a zoning and design standpoint. What is it that people think makes these different areas in town so special? And having that input as we go through the code update will be important to sort of use as a sounding board or a mirror to say, okay, we're changing the town zoning regulations. Is it working to preserve what people say is important about their area? or is it not? So I think in my mind, that's why this community engagement is going to be really critical as we go through the code update to be able to reflect back on this input as well as what was gathered through the community plan effort to make sure that the new code is working in unison with what the community wants to see happen and not against what folks want to see happen in Minturn. And then I hear what was said about the survey and the open houses. So the survey is intended to kind of cast that broader net of folks who may not show up to a meeting. And I know I've held enough public meetings and open houses in my career to know that there's only certain people that show up to those. So the idea is that have the survey kind of allow for broader engagement or input from the community, and then the open houses would serve as an opportunity for folks from different neighborhoods to come in and have a discussion with Scott, myself, and Madison about if we want to get into the weeds a bit about what needs to be done in these different areas. That's sort of an opportunity to do that. The survey is going to be more broad, so it doesn't offer the same opportunity that an open house and sort of group discussions would offer. So the engagement the reason we're doing different activities is to kind of create or provide different opportunities for different folks to say their piece and feel like their input has been heard, and hopefully that input is reflected in the code update.
Matt, I just want to say that the beginning of that conversation that you led into about what was discussed in the community plan about zoning districts and things like that was absolutely 100% correct.
Okay.
I don't want to see this project rushed. I have waited a long time to see us fix our code. And I know it's going to take the time to do that. We just don't want to get behind the 8 ball. So
I hear that. Yep. I get that. And I know I'm definitely hearing a desire to let's get going and start working on the code. So I get that. And that's why I think what we'd like to do is while this community engagement is happening, and the input that we gather through the community engagement really, in my mind, will help guide our work on updating the town zoning districts and zoning regulations and design guidelines. But in the meantime, I think in unison with that, we can work on other aspects of the code. Like I said, the review procedures for different types of applications where the community, where if we offered community engagement, we'd probably get 2 people to show up. So I think there's chunks of the code that we can work on and move forward while that community engagement piece is happening, so that it's not like we're going to say, okay, we're going to do community engagement for the next 2 months and push and not do any work on the code. That's really not what we've heard and not our goal.
Jeff has something he'd like to say, please, Matt.
Matt, but I just have a question, like, don't you think that if your goal or your intent when you're having these community engagement discussions or surveys or whatever, isn't there kind of like a pretty simple bullet points, of what you're trying to get out of these people? Like what kind of information, if you had a group of people from Michael's neighborhood all sitting in front of you, aren't you really at the end of the day wanting to understand what do you like about your town? What do you like about your neighborhood? What do you want to see in the future in your neighborhood? And what don't you want to see? What things do you want to see not happen? If somebody were to scrape their lot and start over, what do you not want to see in your neighborhood? And what do you like about your neighborhood that you want to continue to make sure that you keep seeing in your neighborhood? And I don't know, I mean, how much deeper down do you drill than that?
I think that's spot on. And that's what we'd like to know from folks is, yeah, what do you like? And what I'd like to avoid is people saying, well, I like that I can I can walk my dog and say hi to my neighbors, or I know my neighbors. I mean, that's great and all, but when it comes to zoning regulations, that doesn't really that doesn't provide much direction for us. So it's, I like that we have that my neighborhood's small single family homes, there's street trees, there's whatever the sort of various elements that it's, a neighborhood of residences, and we don't have businesses, or we don't have I don't have a gravel pit next to my house, whatever it is. Understanding what those sort of physical elements are that make, what you really like about your neighborhood from sort of a built environment or physical attributes standpoint. That's really what we're trying to pull from people, so that when we get into discussions about zoning and design guidelines, we say, okay, here's what people say they really like and what they don't want to see happen. And that way we can look at the regulations and say, okay, we need to modify them to ensure that they're protecting what people like and not allowing what people don't want to see happen.
Yeah, and I say that because I've been here long enough to know that there's probably something in each zone that is like the stepchild of like, I never want to see that happen again. I don't know how that happened, or a historical use that has been going on for 100 years that maybe the people in the neighborhood would like to see ended. And I'm just hypothetically talking about, like, this is the opportunity, because it's taken us this long to do this. It's going to be probably a while before this gets done again. So whatever we do is going to govern for a while. And so,
Right.
I just think that, like, getting down and really focusing the conversations, if we're having real community engagement, talking with people, making sure that they understand, like you said, what you're getting at and what the intent of what the information you're trying to get is. And it's not, I like to walk my dog and talk to my neighbor. And it's the real nuts and bolts of what you don't like about it, the things that you love about it, and the things that you want to see happen and continue to happen, and what you don't want to see happen. And sometimes it's like, I don't want to see a 3-story building. Or
Yep.
I like the scale of my neighborhood. And unfortunately for some neighborhoods, that's a 1-story slab on grade house. And unfortunately, in this economic environment where we live, it's not economically viable for someone to buy a lot in town that has a 1-story, 700 square foot house on it and redevelop it and make any, smart investment out of that. They're going to say, I need to go 2 stories, or I need to go 2.5 stories. And we've seen it time and time again. Every application that we've seen over the last 5 years has been maximized to the nth degree. Right. And
Right.
that's the challenge.
Yeah. And I think again, I think you're spot on with and that's the conversation I had with Scott Madison, was we need to structure these, both the survey and the open house discussions, to really get at what the specific input that we need for the code update, and not just general conversations about what people love, because that's what was done ideally during the community plan process. Now we're getting into a greater level of detail. And so I think that's correct. And that's how we're going to need to structure the engagement activities. And then in terms of, if people are saying we only want 1-story houses in the neighborhood, that's where there's probably going to be some more difficult conversations about, well, if we only allow 1-story houses or 1-story buildings, is that working towards, say, the community's goal towards affordable housing, things like that? It's gonna limit those opportunities, and maybe that's okay, maybe that's not. And so those will be those conversations that we have with you guys as the planning commission, as well as the town council, about how, if that's the direction we want to go with the regulations.
Well, never mind. I'm not even going to bring it up. Michael has one question.
Just back to what I said earlier, you know, I mean, you're talking about stuff that we could move forward and the importance of moving forward. And, and which I understand, as well as, you know, I think Jeff stated, we don't want to do it, something, or somebody stated, we don't want to do it and then redo it. And I think, you know, interesting things like I mentioned earlier, you know, I think something that we can discuss, you know, if you and Scott or anyone, even us, feel differently, is if there's desire to increase lot coverage or change setbacks or change heights in any other areas of town, I think that's something that we could jump right into. So that's all I have.
Okay.
I would echo Mike's sentiment. I feel like you have a pretty seasoned, besides me, commission that you should be jumping right in to some of this stuff versus it feels like.
Okay, Matt? Is that enough to keep you going?
It is, I appreciate it. And so what we can have for you to review at your next meeting, one will be the draft survey. I'm also thinking that we can present sort of a draft outline or template for these open houses, when they might be held, how they might be structured, things like that, so that you guys have an opportunity to review our thinking about the open houses and provide any feedback you might have. Another item that we're working on our end is a work plan for sort of what sections of the code it makes sense to kind of start digging into, and a tentative timeline. I need to talk to Scott about that, but is that something you guys would like to see as sort of a work or a schedule of when tentatively we'd be digging into different elements or different chunks of the code?
It might be helpful because if people are in the future thinking of things like spring vacation, et cetera, and they really want to be involved and be here for that, it might be helpful to them. I'd like to keep as many of us here through this process for the meetings as possible, you know, and since we're every other week, they might be able to schedule things that way or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Matt, I do think it. Sometimes I like to repeat myself, but I do think that if you have thoughts or if there's thoughts of, you know, changing coverage or setbacks or the basic stuff, that's something that we should really discuss, because that's something that the citizen surveys and stuff shouldn't be left out of, if that's the thought on your end. So I said it 3 times, so I'm good.
and I agree. With that, Matt, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate this.
Have a good
It's been
evening.
very helpful. Yep, you too. Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Next, staff reports, anything? Planning commission comments, anything?
I have one that I've been
Okay,
thinking about, and I don't even know how to even bring this up, but we have a lot of things that are gonna come down the pipe really quickly that's gonna be running clearly like in parallel with this. My understanding is that the application is already in process, that we have to apply the current code. Is that correct?
Yes.
yes.
Okay. So how do we, and I know other towns have done this, trust me. What do we need to put in place that we can stop and say, no more applications until we get this done? Because we have some big stuff that is not an application yet. And they're gonna come in and, I mean, I'm worried about, we're not gonna. We haven't done what we committed to with getting this code revised before some of these items come in, and they're coming. And that's what I know there's a mechanism that as a town we can use to say, we're in the middle of this code, right? And I think as a commission, we have an obligation to understand what that process is and think about it. Because we have some big stuff coming through and we are in no place.
You know that we don't know.
I feel like we have we're gonna be having a lot of applications for new everything coming through.
Pending water.
But yeah, it's on the wall.
Well, I think.
Well,
If
let
you're-
Let Madison answer this.
Yeah. So
So that would be a council decision to implement a moratorium on any development applications, much like we did a couple years ago while we were processing historic preservation. That ordinance, putting that together, we put a moratorium in for the 100 block specifically for like 6 months, 8 months, something like that. It is a big deal to put a moratorium in
I think
place.
that my understanding is can we go back to our attorneys and ask if there's another tool out there besides the M word that can be used?
I can ask, but I
Thank you.
doubt there's another answer.
The sticky wicky you run into, same thing that happened with 100 block. Is you need to have an end date in your brain housing group before you ever spit out the word moratorium.
I-
And that
We need
was
to
the
have
problem with the
another
past.
tool.
So in light of what Matt said in regards to his timeline, there's no way we can credibly look at an applicant and go, sorry, we froze this thing. Okay, cool. When are you gonna unfreeze it? We have no clue.
Let's go ask if there's another tool that could be used.
We can ask. I'm just saying inevitably, if there is a demarcation line we want to draw, more than likely it's gonna be a moratorium, but I strongly recommend against that unless you have a definitive timeline that's not gonna get kicked in the sand and slid multiple months.
I think our current code is pretty, it isn't terrible.
I'm thinking more of this and stuff it's not. And so I just think, yeah, anyway, I just makes me nervous. Okay, that was it. Thanks.
Future meetings, February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day. I have to promise candy. I have a good idea.
Hmm.
Because I had gotten a gift that was awesome, so I'll see what I can do about that. February 28th. Is anybody gonna be gone in February?
Not that I'm aware of.
February 28th, I probably will not be in attendance.
Will you be zooming?
Probably, I would like to,
Be on the beach, differ from them.
no, I have a house. Yeah.
You have a
It's,
house?
it's spring break. So I could be on Zoom.
Okay, so Madison, will you please put that in there so we don't forget, and we'll check with her again in February. After she
Is that a
confirms
kid's
what's
school
happening.
break?
It is. Yeah.
I'm not going.
Anything else? What's next, Tom? We're gonna give it
Make
to
a
you.
motion to adjourn this meeting.
All in favor?
Aye.
Are you